Although the House of Cadmus was the first great heroic family, a new line of heroes would soon emerge from the kingdom of Argos, a powerful city between Athens and Sparta. There ruled King Acrisius, a man whose fear would set in motion events that would spawn one of Greece's greatest heroes. Acrisius had no sons, only a daughter named Danae, and this troubled him greatly. When he consulted the oracle at Delphi, she delivered a prophecy that chilled his blood. "Your daughter will bear a son who will kill you." Despite the threat to his life, Acrisius could not bring himself to kill his beloved daughter, but he could prevent her from ever meeting a man. He built a bronze tower with no doors and only a single window, too small to escape from, and locked his daughter inside. But such obstacles meant nothing to Zeus. Looking down from Olympus, the king of the gods saw Danae imprisoned in her tower and saw only another conquest to be had. He transformed himself into a shower of golden light and poured through the cracks in the bronze walls, falling upon her like rain made of sunlight. And from that union, a son named Perseus was born. When Acrisius discovered his daughter had somehow had a child, he was horrified, yet still he could not bring himself to commit direct murder. Instead, he would leave their fate up to the gods, locking both his daughter and grandson in a wooden chest and having it thrown into the sea. The chest drifted for days, until the waves carried it to Seriphos, a small rocky island in the Aegean, where a fisherman named Dictys found it tangled in his nets. A kind man, Dictys brought them to his home and raised Perseus as his own son, teaching him to fish and navigate the dangerous waters around the island. But Dictys had a brother, and that brother was a problem. King Polydectes ruled Seriphos and desired Danae as his wife, and, like most kings, he would not take no for an answer. The king's ire grew with each rejection she dealt him, until finally the only thing stopping him from taking what he wanted by force was Danae's son, Perseus, a young man of extraordinary strength who always kept his mother close. Soon the king could think of nothing else but finding some way to rid the island of the boy so he could take the woman he believed was his by right. Finally, after months of scheming, an opportunity would present itself. Polydectes had announced that he was planning to marry and had requested that all the noble young men of the island attend a feast in his honor. Yet when they arrived, Perseus included, Polydectes announced that he would begin the feast by collecting a horse as tribute from all his guests, as was custom. It was a calculated decision, for he knew that Perseus, despite his strength and skill, was but a poor fisherman, and had no money with which to buy such a gift. As expected, when the young men presented their horses, Perseus, embarrassed by his lack of an offering, instead made a rash declaration. "I have no horse, but I could bring you a greater gift. I could—" He paused for a minute, thinking about what he could offer. "I could bring you the head of Medusa, the Gorgon." Gasps rang out around the hall. All had heard of the terrifying creature whose gaze turned men to stone, and all knew that none who had sought her out had ever returned. But King Polydectes only smiled. "I accept. Bring me Medusa's head." Perseus left the feast, knowing he had been manipulated into an impossible task, but honor-bound to complete it anyway. But Perseus, as with all of Zeus's children, was never truly alone. As he prepared to leave the island, two figures appeared to him on the shore, Hermes and Athena. "Your boast was foolish, but brave," Hermes said. "The gods have watched you grow, Perseus. Your father cannot openly intervene, for Hera always watches, but he has sent me to help, along with the other god who has an interest in Medusa's fate." Athena stepped forward, her grey eyes cold. "Medusa was once my priestess. she said, the venom clear in her voice. She defiled my temple and broke her sacred vows. I want her dead, but I cannot kill her myself without appearing petty. You, however, can do it for me." She offered him a shield, polished to such perfection that he could see his own reflection in its bronze surface. "Never look directly at her," Athena warned, "for her gaze turns flesh to stone in an instant. But the reflection in the shield will diminish the curse's power, giving you a few moments to strike before the magic takes hold." Hermes then handed Perseus a sword, the likes of which he had never seen. "Adamantine," Hermes explained, "unbreakable and sharp enough to cut through anything, even a Gorgon's neck." He reached into his travelling cloak and produced a number of items, handing them to the young hero. "Winged sandals," he explained, "so you can fly to where she hides. Hades' helm of invisibility, so you can approach unseen, and an enchanted bag that will contain Medusa's head safely, as her gaze remains deadly even after death." Perseus took the gifts, overwhelmed by their weight and significance. "Where do I find her?" Athena and Hermes exchanged glances. "That knowledge is not ours to give," Hermes said carefully. "Only 3 beings know where the Gorgons hide. The Graeae, the Grey Sisters. They are the Gorgons' aunts, and they will not give up the information willingly. You will find them at the edge of the world, where twilight never ends." "And how do I convince them to tell me?" Perseus asked. Athena's lips curved into a smile. "You are a clever young man. You will find a way." The Grey Sisters. Perseus flew west until he reached a place where the light never changed, a perpetual grey twilight that cast no shadows. The landscape here was colourless and desolate, covered in fine ash that stirred in a wind that never quite stopped blowing. He heard them before he saw them, 3 voices arguing in the gloom. "Sister, the eye! I cannot see!" one voice called out. "Wait your turn, I'm still looking," another replied. "But I have been waiting," a third shouted angrily. "You have had it for hours." Perseus descended quietly, the helm rendering him invisible. 3 ancient figures sat hunched around a small fire, their skin grey and papery, their hair long and colourless. These were the Graeae, and as Perseus watched, he saw that the sisters shared more than just blood. Between the 3 of them, they shared a single eye and a single tooth, passed back and forth in endless argument. One of the sisters held it now, pressing the yellowed orb into her empty socket and looking around at the barren landscape with an expression of profound boredom. "Nothing," she muttered. "There is never anything to see in this cursed place." "Then give it to me," another sister demanded, reaching out with gnarled fingers. "And the tooth, I'm hungry." The first sister plucked the eye from her socket and held it out. At the same moment, the second sister passed across the single yellowed tooth. For just a moment, as the items exchanged hands, all 3 sisters were blind and toothless. Perseus saw his chance. Creeping forward, he snatched both eye and tooth from the air before either sister could grasp it. "Where is it?" one shrieked, her empty hands grasping at nothing. "Sister, do you see the tooth?" "How could I see the tooth when I don't have the eye?" the first replied. "You must have dropped it." All 3 began groping frantically in the grey ash, blind and confused. "Who has taken them?" the eldest croaked. "Who dares steal from the Graeae?" Perseus removed his helm, visible now in the gloom. "I have." The 3 sisters turned their empty sockets towards his voice. "A man!" one hissed. "A thief! Give them back!" another demanded. "Return what you have stolen or face our curse." "I need something from you first," Perseus said, confident in his power over them. "Tell me where Medusa hides, and I will return your eye and tooth." The three sisters fell silent. Then the eldest spoke, her voice filled with sorrow. "You seek our niece. She is not what you think. She was beautiful once, kind, before the gods. It matters not what she was," the youngest interrupted. "Tell him and be done with it. We cannot live without our sight." The eldest relented. "The Gorgons dwell on the Libyan coast, where the land meets the sea. There is a cave there, marked by statues, warriors who sought glory and found only stone. You cannot miss it." "Thank you," Perseus said, tossing the eye and tooth back towards them. One sister caught the eye and pressed it into her socket, glaring at him with such hatred that he took a step back. "You may have what you came for," she spat, "but hear this, son of Zeus. The blood you spill will return to haunt you. We curse you with the fate you deserve." Perseus felt a chill run through him as he fastened the helm and took to the air, their voices fading behind him as they cursed his name into the grey twilight. The Gorgon's Head. The Grey-Eye had sought to protect Medusa, not just because she was their niece, but because they knew her story, one unknown to Perseus and the other heroes that had come to hunt her across the years. Before she became a monster, Medusa had been a woman, humble and kind, and a devoted priestess of Athena. She had sworn a vow of celibacy as part of her service to the goddess, but, as with many attractive young women in Greece, she had caught the attention of a god. Poseidon, upon seeing her one day on the shore, decided he wanted her for his own. Following her back to Athena's temple, he came inside in a great torrent of brine and salt water and forced himself upon her. The temple was ruined, the walls stained, and offerings washed away, with Medusa's vow of celibacy having been broken against her will. Athena was furious at the desecration of her sacred space, but with no way to punish her powerful uncle Poseidon, instead turned her fury on the helpless priestess. She cursed Medusa, transforming her once beautiful features into something monstrous. Her hair became writhing serpents, while her gaze became so horrifying as to turn any who looked upon her to stone. Medusa's two sisters, who tried to defend her, were transformed as well, with the three coming to be known as the Gorgons. Exiled from their homeland, the three sisters found a cave on the Libyan coast, where they tried to hide away in shame. But word soon spread of the terrifying Gorgons, with warriors from far and wide arriving to hunt them for sport and glory, seeing little more than monsters to be slain. As the years passed and men kept trying to kill them, the sisters became more vicious and hostile, with Medusa transforming into the very monster Athena had made her. And so, as Perseus approached Medusa's cave, decades after her transformation, all he saw were the brutal remnants of her kills. The approach was littered with hundreds of stone statues, each one frozen in their last moments of terror. Some of the statues were charging forward with spears raised, while others were begging on their knees, but all had expressions of pure horror etched forever on their features. Perseus donned his helm of invisibility and crept through the statues. Two of the Gorgons paced near the entrance, their serpent hair writhing, but he had little to fear from them, as it was only Medusa's gaze that could turn men to stone. Making his way into the deepest depths of the cave, he finally found her, her serpentine body coiled up among the petrified remains of her victims. Perseus crept forward, using only the reflection in Athena's shield to guide him as he neared. But as he came next to her, a loud crack sounded beneath his sandal. Looking down in horror, he saw a petrified arm snapped in two beneath his foot. The snakes in Medusa's hair looked up and began to hiss. Her eyes began to open. Perseus had but seconds to strike. He swung the adamantine sword in a single arc, guided by the reflection. The blade cut through Medusa's neck cleanly, and her head fell before her eyes could focus. Her sisters shrieked in rage, but Perseus grabbed the head by its serpent hair, shoved it into the enchanted bag, and ran for the cave entrance. As he did, something extraordinary happened. From Medusa's severed neck, two forms emerged. Chrysaor, a warrior born fully armed, and Pegasus, a magnificent winged horse of pure white. These were Poseidon's children, conceived during the assault in Athena's temple, having been growing inside her all this time. Pegasus spread his wings and bolted for the cave entrance. Perseus, with little time to think, ran after the horse. He caught Pegasus just outside the cave and leapt onto his back. The horse didn't resist, taking flight and rising into the sky as Medusa's sisters emerged below, crying out in anguish at the death of their beloved sister. Andromeda. As Perseus and Pegasus soared over the Libyan desert, blood from Medusa's severed head began seeping through the enchanted bag, dripping down onto the sands far below. Where each drop landed sprang serpents of every kind, vipers, asps, and cobras, which would spread across the desert. From that day forward, Libya would be known as a land of serpents, a final curse left by Medusa, even in death. But as Perseus neared the coast, he found himself embroiled in yet another dispute between a mortal and the gods. Queen Cassiopeia of Ethiopia was known far and wide for her incredible beauty, a fact that had seen her arrogance grow to unbearable heights. She had declared herself the most beautiful woman on earth, setting up mirrors about her palace so that she could see her reflection day and night. But it was not enough. Now she had gone further, claiming that her beauty surpassed even the Nereids, the sacred companions of Poseidon, a foolish comment considering her kingdom was built on the coast. Within days, Poseidon had flooded the kingdom, sending the sea monster Cetus to kill its people and prevent any from coming near. When Cassiopeia had desperately consulted an oracle on how to appease the god, her worst fears would be realized when it declared that only the sacrifice of her daughter, Andromeda, would end the attacks. And so it was that Perseus, flying over the coastline, saw a young woman bound to a rock, naked and helpless as the waves washed over her. He descended to investigate, asking the woman her name and story. Perseus listened carefully as she revealed all before responding. "This is unjust," he said. "You should not die for words your mother spoke." "Justice and fate are rarely the same thing," Andromeda replied. "You ride a winged horse and carry a sword. Are you a hero?" "I am trying to be," he said, puffing out his chest slightly. "Then I suppose you have come to fight the monster," Andromeda replied, hope clear in her voice. "Can you kill it?" "I have already killed a Gorgon," Perseus assured her. "A sea monster should be no problem." Without another word, he was up in the air, hiding in the clouds as he watched for the monster to approach. He would not have to wait long. The sea began to churn, then burst open as Cetus erupted from the depths. He was a serpent easily the length of 10 ships, covered in scales black as midnight. The creature rushed towards Andromeda, its massive jaws open, ready to accept the sacrifice. But then Perseus was on him, slashing and hacking at the creature's eyes. Cetus thrashed, confused, trying desperately to find his attacker, but Perseus was too fast, driving his unbreakable sword into fins and gills, cutting at the soft scales beneath its jaws. Finally, Perseus saw an opening and drove his sword deep into Cetus's skull, the light fading from the creature's eyes as it sank back beneath the waves. The monster slain, Perseus freed Andromeda from her chains and took her back to the shore where the entire city had been watching. Queen Cassiopeia embraced her daughter with tears in her eyes, thanking Perseus for his miraculous intervention and offering him the only thing worthy of such a feat, her daughter's hand in marriage. Perseus accepted, and the two wed that evening. Setting out to Seriphos the following morning, Perseus carried not just the Gorgon's head, but also a wife of his own choosing, with the two ready to start a new life together. But that could wait. For now his mother was still in danger, and Perseus was the only one who could save her. The fate of King Polydectes. When Perseus arrived at Seriphos, he found that things were worse than he had feared. Without Perseus to oppose him, King Polydectes had turned to violence to force Danae to wed him. She had fled with the fisherman Dictys, seeking refuge in the temple of Athena, sacred ground even the king would not violate. But over a week had passed, and the two had run out of supplies, with it only a matter of time before they had to choose between starvation and submission. Perseus saw the commotion from the sky as he approached, flying directly to the temple which the king's soldiers had surrounded. Jumping off his steed, he sent Pegasus and Andromeda away to safety before turning to the king and his guards. "I have returned," he announced, holding up the bloody bag. "I have the gift you requested." Polydectes laughed nervously, clearly unnerved at seeing the boy arrive on a winged horse. "You expect me to believe you killed Medusa? No, you lie. You must be guards." He gestured to the men around him. "Kill this liar." The soldiers began to creep forward. Perseus was strong, but taking on 24 armed men was too much, even for a son of Zeus. But he did not need to. Reaching down into the enchanted bag, he pulled out Medusa's head, shielding his eyes as he held it out before him. Polydectes' expression shifted from contempt to horror as his skin hardened to stone. The guards rushed forward to stop Perseus, but it was too late. Within seconds, Medusa's gaze had done its work, with the chaos of the final confrontation forever immortalised in stone. Perseus returned the head to his bag and opened the doors to the temple, finding his mother and Dictys inside. The three of them embraced, laughing and weeping together, finally free from Polydectes' tyranny. The next few weeks were filled with joy. Perseus introduced his new wife to his mother and, forever grateful to Dictys for protecting his mother, made the old fisherman king of the island, with his reign to be marked by peace and prosperity. His journey over, Perseus returned the gifts the gods had given him to Athena's temple, alongside Medusa's head, for he no longer had any need of it. Athena, upon retrieving the head, decided she had not finished with her old priestess. She took the head and affixed it to her aegis, the divine breastplate she wore into battle, where it would stay forevermore. Medusa, who had suffered so much in life, would find no peace even in death. Whenever Athena went to war, Medusa would come with her terrifying gaze breaking the minds of men who dared to oppose the goddess. The prophecy fulfilled. With his mother safe, Perseus decided to return to Argos, the land of his birth, hoping to learn the truth of his past and make peace with his grandfather. He took Andromeda and Danae and flew to the city, one final trip on Pegasus before the creature departed to Olympus, where the gods still had plans for the divine horse. But when they arrived, Perseus quickly discovered that his grandfather, Acrisius, had abandoned the throne and fled when news had arrived of his grandson's return, still fearful of the prophecy learned years ago. Although he was disappointed that he would not be able to meet his grandfather, Perseus decided he still wanted to make himself known in his homeland, with a local athletic tournament being the perfect opportunity to win himself glory. As the tournament began, Perseus would win event after event, the blood of Zeus showing true. Perseus, however, had still not learnt his own strength, and when it was his turn in the discus competition, he launched it with all his might. The discus flew farther than anyone had ever thrown, sailing over the field and into the crowd of spectators. A cry went up. Someone had been struck. Perseus ran towards the commotion and found an old man lying on the ground, blood seeping from a wound on his temple. It was Acrisius. He had been watching in disguise. Despite his fear, he had returned to see his grandson compete, and as he watched Perseus win challenge after challenge, he had even begun to cheer. "That's my grandson!" he had cried out. "Have you ever seen a discus thrown like that?" They were the last words he ever spoke. Fate could not be denied. Despite every precaution, the imprisonment and banishment of his family, his desperate attempts to hide, the oracle's prophecy had still been fulfilled, and Acrisius had been struck down by his grandson in the very moment he finally accepted him. Perseus was distraught when he realized the truth and knew he could not remain in Argos. The killing of family, deliberate or otherwise, polluted not just the killer, but the entire community. Instead, he travelled north and founded his own city, a place called Mycenae. With the help of the Cyclops, he built walls with such enormous stones that later Greeks would call them Cyclopean walls, believing no ordinary humans could have moved them. It was from this city that Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek forces during the Trojan War, would one day rule, amassing more wealth and power than any king had before him. But for now, Perseus ruled from Mycenae. He and Andromeda had many children, and their descendants would rule the region for generations, kings and queens tracing their lineage back to the blood of Zeus. And one day, many years later, one of these descendants would give birth to a son who would become the greatest hero Greece had ever known. That son's name would be Heracles, and his story would become famed throughout the world. But before that great champion was born, before his labours shook the world, there was another hero whose tale served as a warning about the dangers of pride. His name was Bellerophon, and his rise and fall would be inextricably linked to the winged horse that Perseus had set free. I've been David Rintoul for Deep Dive History. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.